Bonsoir, good evening. Welcome to the special public meeting for December the 9th. Adoption of the agenda.
That the agenda be approved as presented.
I have a mover. Moved by Councillor Burnett, second by Councillor LeBlanc. All those in favor signify. Aye. All those against. Motion carried. Declaration of conflict of interest.
No conflict of interest were declared.
Okay. Public and administrative presentations. Parks and Recreation Master Plan by Sierra Management and Planning. Good evening.
You're going to have to give him the mic.
Okay. Just a moment. I'll give you the podium.
There we go. That's better. Good evening, Deputy Mayor, members of Council, staff, and any members of the public. Thank you. There is a presentation. It is a fairly long presentation, so I'll dive straight into it. But just before I start, as always, I'd just like to acknowledge this is the draft plan that is summarized here, and these plans tend to be quite long in the making, and they involve the input from residents that take their time, members of the sports and other user groups that take their time as well to come to meetings and offer support. But also, these kind of projects are not achievable unless we have good support from members of the administration and staff, whether it be from communications to Ryan and colleagues. So we appreciate that very much. So with that, I will dive straight into it. So the 2024 master plan, which will really be a 2025 start date, is, as you've seen before when we've talked about this, it's broad in its scope. It sort of stops. It's not a culture plan, as say. It doesn't get into library services in any great detail or anything of that nature, but or events and festivals. But it focuses on everything that is community oriented in terms of indoor sports, parks and active fields, as well as the trail systems, and importantly as well programs and services, because at the end of the day any of these assets are really judged by how they're used, and so it is very important. The timeline, we like to break these things up so that what you have at the end of the day is a plan that, whether or not there are particular issues that Council want to discuss on one or other recommendation, the process has been set very carefully. So that sort of a plinth, that foundation is a situation analysis which should really be driven by the evidence before us in terms of how facilities are used, their conditions, what people think of them, how you stack up against other comparable jurisdictions, either in province or if there's a particular reason, we might look elsewhere as well. And then it's very important to have consultation as a backbone. It's not the only thing. This isn't just a shopping list of what people want. It's putting it all together into a mix. And so we came up with a series of recommendations, and then the master plan, of which the presentation is a summary here, it reflects that. So the construct is that the master plan, if approved and adopted as policy, becomes the guidance document going forward. It would run past, the next municipal election. It becomes that sort of 10-year vision that allows staff to be able to budget effectively the resources that will need to be put in place to keep facilities going and to make replacements and add new facilities and respond to the needs of the community as they may arise over the period as well. So it's an important process, and that's why I think we've taken the time that we have to do that. So in terms of the consultation, which I said was a backbone, just very quickly, that involved community workshops, a public online survey, which was very well responded to. So again, kudos to the city for its administration and communications in that regard. And then we also went out to user groups, and we got 41 user groups. So that's the hockey, that's the various sports that you get, as well as other sort of community associations that are interested in responding. So that's very, very helpful, and the result of it is a lot of information, which I think at the end of the project here is a repository of information which the city should hold to reflect on what people say it's a snapshot in time, but it indicates what groups said about their particular needs. Importantly, coming out of the pandemic as well. I think this is an interesting time to have this kind of work done. I'm not going to focus on this too much. I'm sure that Council sees these sorts of charts in the various things that you do, but to just indicate that you know, where the growth is in the city is obviously a little bit patchy, and that reflects a whole range of urban conditions. The province is on an uptick in terms of growth, and you know, where it goes from here will be an interesting exercise to see over the next few years. But the recreation plan, to the extent it draws upon guidelines or ratios for when you should build and what you should build, in other words, provision standards, so how many arenas you need for a given population, and so on and so forth, how many sports fields, you know, it is anchored to that. So if the growth accelerates, you know, you would expect staff to look at the plan and say, okay, we're reaching our targets sooner than we had thought, we need to plan accordingly. And obviously the reverse is true as well. This one I think is important to recognize. Like a lot of places, the city is growing older, and it's a little bit of a concern, only in as much as, you know, economically, I know the city, I'm sure, in its considerations of economic development is looking to create a balance. It's difficult to achieve. Lots of places are growing older because of the proportion of people who are in that sort of 65 and older category is so large in the country as a whole. But what it tells us from a recreation perspective is that there's part of what we have to look at here is not just about people recreating, enjoying themselves, kids playing sport, adults, you know, playing pickleball next door, doing all of that kind of good stuff. It's to what extent is the capital that you are going to need to put in over time and the operating deficits to support this, to what extent does that reflect your commitments to economic development, to having the city grow and the region grow? Because we always feel that, you know, quality of life and access to things like recreation, not exclusively, but things like recreation, and on the other side, getting, you know, jobs on the ground, bringing in businesses, it's two sides of the same coin. And so, you know, when we look at this kind of graphic here, we just want to bear in mind that when you look at, you know, the average age, you know, 53, median age, I should say, 53, quite a bit older than the province as a whole. That's something which, it doesn't mean you just plan for older people, but it certainly doesn't mean you don't plan for older people. You just have to recognize that the entire project of improving access to quality of life and recreation as part of it becomes fundamental to this thing. I was on the plane today coming over, and there was a chap who was from Moncton, spent his whole life, or I got the impression he spent most of his working life in Ontario. Come back, he had bought a place, and we were just talking about, you know, that there's lots of people that do that. So that kind of sometimes feeds the model. So we have to provide things for people who are coming in as retirees. But, you know, anyone sort of 55 and over, it's such a massive part of the population that there's lots of things that we need to do to help them. So in terms of the guidance, so that's sort of just a background to how the city is changing the region. In terms of any recreation master plan, this slide here about what might appear kind of somewhat sort of motherhood statements, a little bit vague, they're designed to be able, so that the plan has some anchors that they're able to move with the waves, move in the wind. Pick your analogy. The point is that the plan needs to be flexible enough that it can respond to unforeseen circumstances. I'll give you one example. We've been, thankfully we were commissioned, and we did the aquatic, the replacement for the aquatic facility as a regional project. Found a good place for it as part of the KC Irving Center. Went through it, costed it. We've done all that. The feasibility is set. The how-to is the next piece, which is the tricky bit. So if you, for example, had a situation in the plan. We are envisaging that within a reasonable period of time, and we're quite vague about it, within a reasonable period of time that project would come to fruition. But what if it doesn't? Right? So the plan you still have to be able to respond to these principles to allow people to get what they need in terms of recreation. So I'll just sort of whip through what they are. And the first one is to recognize that the city is a hub. Everybody appreciates that, I think. It's the heart of the Regional Service Commission in terms of where a lot of the assets are, the arena, major arenas, and the employment, but also the pool as well. So we've got to recognize that. That should be a driving force going forward to try and get things like that pool implemented, for example. The other aspect is we in many places, we live in a winter city, and so the idea of having good year-round recreation, I think, is really fundamental, particularly if the population is aging. It's fundamental. You see it in Northern Ontario and places where there are limited opportunities. Bathurst obviously has a lot more potential because you have the existing facilities here, but it's still an important consideration. Maintain existing facilities. So if you were to look at the recreation master plan and pull back from it and say what's changed, there's some big ticket items in there, the pool being one of them, but it really is layered on top of, those are incremental pieces on top of the existing base of everything you have. So we tend to get caught up in what we're saying is new, what needs to come in as new, but what you really need to do is asset management. It's taking care of what you have and recognizing that sometimes the fastest way to get to an improved state is just to take care of what you have. So you can see the relationship there about things like the pool and others. You've got to kind of have a foot in both boats approach and hope that you can keep sailing with that for a while. Partnerships are going to remain very important, and we place partnerships as anything from the federal level and getting grant funding right down to working with municipal partners and individual user groups. And then the last piece, which is coming into view for a lot more communities, is that how does this plan fit into commitments you might have for inclusivity, to improve those kinds of things? And, recreation plans typically had a lens or a view on how you got people that perhaps didn't have the means to partake in sports to get into those programs. Health and wellness was important, but beyond that, we see a lot of corporate, diversity and equity and inclusivity strategies, and so the ability here is to recognize that the plan has an important function here in that regard. That should, that may relate to how we develop some programming. So onto the programs and dealing with the services. Maybe I'll just start with that. So there are going to be changing preferences, changing needs, and as long as the administration is staffed with sufficient resources, the city is in a very good position to be able to develop programming, facilitate programming. Again, just without belaboring the aquatic center, if that was to be developed, you could see a situation where the city has access to a facility that is part of a larger facility, the arenas complex, and the amount of opportunity to program, not just the wet space, not just the pool, but the dry space that's in that building as well, year-round, becomes a real opportunity. What it will mean is that there needs to be the appropriate operating budgets put in place at the level of the city as a whole in order to be able to do that. And then establish a well-rounded suite of free and subsidized programs. The ability to be able to provide access to the taxpayer is going to be important, and so that balance between user fees and free or low cost remains important as going forward. That doesn't seem to want to work. There we go. Let's just make sure I haven't jumped. Okay, on to the question of the arena. So just to sort of, again, just to preface that, you know, the KCIC, the event center, as I call it, because that's what it is. It's what, 3,500, 4,000 seats, Q League franchise in there, event center, and then the community facility attached to it. Both operate as community facilities, but what you have is a major facility there. And I forget what the cost was. I know it was probably in the 20s somewhere, in 1996. So the building is just creeping into it's youthful middle age. It's not even quite there yet. We're looking at projects around the country where to build the same 4,000 seats, you're looking at somewhere in around $100 million to build. So this is where that's just contextual, but what it says is that facility, good for the next 25, 30 years, depending, you know, and longer if it's maintained. That regional facility, and it is very much a regional facility, becomes very, very significant to the opportunity. It's for a population of 16,000 people, just at a city level. It's a significant opportunity that a lot of places are striving for, and they are, you know, would not be able to achieve it. Some of the biggest cities are looking at, you know, 170 million in Sudbury, I think, for a 6,000 seat facility to replace their OHL building there. They need to do it to stay in that particular business and meet the expectations of the community. But that's the scale. So what we wanted to say here is that we fully understand that, you know, the building can be both two things at once. It can be regional, it can be community oriented. It depends which part of the building we're talking about. And so we do want to make sure that that building is maintained, so operate it, you know, to try and generate commercial events. It's good for the community, but recognize that it is a major asset to support the region as well. Asset management, and asset management. Maintain that facility in great shape. And you know, obviously, in our view, the regional cost sharing for that portion of the building's really fundamental. So that's what's in the plan. There we go. Aquatics. I won't go into too much detail. Council's had the presentation on this as well, but just obviously the goal is to replace the existing facility and to provide a modern facility. And I think this speaks very much to the economic development opportunity. There are, as you know, a number of places in the province that are looking to develop or are currently in the process. Miramichi is the closest. Fredericton is in a design process for a replacement pool for the Samax Aitken pool there at UNB. And Moncton, I don't think there's a plan on the table just yet, but there is reinvestment in aquatics. So, you know, one of the things we would say coming out of the plan is to do what is possible to move the funding question forward. Whether that be building reserves or whether it be going to partners or speaking with the federal and provincial governments. Gymnasiums, there are, you know, by that count there are, you know, six schools, and then you have the pavilion here. Again, another sort of feather in the cap for the city, I think, is that that facility from the Canada Games provides you with a municipal gymnasium that you control. There are lots of municipalities around the country that do not have access to a municipal gymnasium. They would like to. They're thinking about building. So when they do build a pool, they'll put a gymnasium with it. We would have liked in that aquatic study, and we did sort of stipulate that you could have a gymnasium attached at a future date. That would make perfect sense. So you would have two gyms, but I think, again, you'll find they get used. But for the moment, the recommendation is really to maintain course. Make sure that everyone who is using the gymnasiums is maintained in terms of their satisfaction to the extent you can. and maintain that relationship with the school system as well. Very good utilization as well, as you can see. Then on to what we thought was really the mainstay of the plan. So again, when we get into when you read it, we make a lot of discussion about access to parkland. So just to back up again, just on the sort of a higher level, the city has around 9 operational. It has a very. Let me just back up again. You have a very good standard of the amount of parkland per 1,000 people. It's up around 3.5 hectares per 1,000 people. That's good. There's no need to sort of go and build additional parkland for the existing population. But it all comes down to, if you're a member of the public, you say, well, that's all well and good, but I want to be able to get out close to where I live. I want to be able to do this or that, or my children to have access to facilities when they're supposed to be available. And we'd like year-round access to some of this stuff as well. So there are really 9 operational parks in the city, which is not a small number, but it's not a huge number. It means that each one of them has a particular role to play. And so what we've done is just broke it down into sort of some quadrants, really. We didn't want to go any further in terms of having service areas around parks. We know that everyone wants to be walkable. It's not always going to be possible given where these parks are. But there are other assets, the undeveloped parks that people use informally as well. So I'm just going to go for the next couple of slides. I'm just going to go through fairly quickly. It's fairly self-explanatory, but just to highlight what our recommendations were. So in the north, looking at North Tetagouche Park, that one obviously came in with the local government reform. It's obviously sort of fairly distant from the urban core. The outside of that, but the cladding on the building, we weren't able to get in, but the cladding on the building is good. It looks attractive from the outside. The hockey rink has been sort of retooled from what we can see, made a little smaller. It's got opportunities there for, looks like ball hockey or summer hockey, and then pickleball as well. So the playground looks great. So that one really is just sort of a maintain the use of that facility. Even if people have to drive out there, get to use that facility as much as possible. Victoria Park, the recommendation there really is about park renewal. Again, it's an interesting park next to seniors' residences. There's no parking on the site. There's a lot that's in there which is quite interesting. It's very passive. The community gardens. There are obviously things that people care about quite a lot. But I think, there needs to be, if there can be, budgeted, nothing urgent, but over a period of time to improve that park and maybe throw in, again, some opportunities for intergenerational opportunities. So playgrounds, something of that nature. Centennial Park, that was certainly one of my favorites in terms of just getting a feel for the whole complex there. Really sort of well maintained from what we can tell. Ball Diamond's a bit of an exception, but that's because it's not used as much. But even that had a really nice berm to it, and you can envisage it being used really well. Pickleball was excellent, and so there are some more improvements that can happen. Another pickleball court, perhaps. Thinking about what you could use that open lawn space for, but really really great space. One to continue to use. U-Haul Beach, again, I was there on a really hot day here, and so I went out there and I could see it was like 5 degrees cooler. And that's, this is where you might want to be in the middle of summer. It was a great spot. Again, lots has been done to improve it, the beach volleyball, the accessible access to the beach, and then on the sort of the older park side, there are some things that need to be improved. There's some of the buildings are a little bit tired down by the amphitheater. But again, a remarkable space that you're going to need to invest in, so we just have to put the asset management plans in place to do so. And then the Place de Jeunes, that one is very active space, lots going on. I think, the 2 asphalt tennis courts that are used should be lit, and then other than that, it's take care. Maybe talk to the school board about the potential for putting field turf on the inside of that track, maybe improving it. It's not cheap to do that. It's on school board property. I think any municipality would have some trepidation. Even if you have a great relationship, there's going to be some trepidation about using municipal resources for that. But it's in place. It's a great location. And obviously it's going to host a number of tournaments and events if you were to do that. So again, it's economic development as well. So downtown, this one, I won't go into too much detail on this other than to indicate that what's being done in the main sort of what I call the tourist areas, that guys like me flock to in the summer and we see all the things going on, great. I mean, there's obviously I'm sure there's some operational challenges that we don't get to see or we don't appreciate, but generally keep it going because it's the money shot for downtown Bathurst. There are some improvements around going down to on the sort of the eastern side, opposite where the brewery is, etc. There can be some significant improvements there. I think that's a good project to do. But then into Coronation Park, without going into too much detail on that, we understand there are some challenges on the quality of the soils there. Some of it was landfill. And so, we had started with a project was put field turf, which is the artificial turf, down where the soccer field is, and we were advised, I think, very politely that you need to look at the condition of the soils because it's not necessarily the best investment. So we take that sort of thing on board. Looking around the Vickers Field, those baseball complexes, obviously over time there needs to be some reinvestment or reconsideration of uses. I'm certainly aware that Vickers Field has been sort of earmarked by some for alternative uses. And, at the end of the day, our plan comes down to this plan needs to be flexible. You've got to look at the principles. So council can make its decisions. But if I look at this through the cold light of a financial picture, we priced the other day for another project a full-size senior baseball diamond at $750,000 to do. So, if that field were recommissioned for something else, just bear in mind that it's probably not coming back anytime soon. So there are some things to consider. I think there's some master planning that obviously has to happen. Ryan is obviously working with the group that is in the community doing that as well.
We got a question here from Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. John, with regards to Vickers Field, so I just want to be clear that you're saying we should be maintaining Vickers Field and not getting rid of our senior ball field, correct?
Yeah, I mean, the city has been very clear. We have a mandate to look at this from recreation, but we've been made aware that there were, some overtures for alternative use. Mm-hmm. So we're not fully apprised of what that is. But what we would say is that the park has to function in a couple of different ways. Like when I looked at it, walking around, I saw the southern part of it as being sports-oriented, mm-hmm. Not entirely, but a little bit. The northern half, I guess, as being something that you could curry more community use generally. Mm-hmm. So that's the lens that we took from it, and then the question, if posed is, could you recommission that facility because it's not really being used? The advice is, if you don't have a senior team, you still have kids using these kinds of spaces. They just have different rules for stealing base because if they're tiny and it fires back on an adult size diamond and they steal 3 bases, it's not a real game. But you just put rules in place. But it comes down to the cost. Just everyone should be aware that to rebuild a baseball diamond of that nature is not a cheap exercise. So
perfect.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks.
Downtown waterfront. We're almost through. I appreciate your patience. The downtown waterfront. If you look at it, and there's another slide I'll show you momentarily, but you've got some great vistas and you've got some real history, and you've got the where the dry docks were, or the wooden dry dock installations for bringing the boats out to be worked on in years gone by. great opportunity. I would say, in terms of accessibility, obviously that it's going to be more challenging if you have accessibility challenges to get right around. But the opportunity, so there are some identifiable projects that you could put forward and get grant funding and maintain. But I do think a little bit of visioning for it. Nothing major, not bringing in, a huge expensive consulting assignment, but just sort of looking at the city's going to develop in terms of its urban redevelopment opportunities according to whatever pace that is. But the public connections are stuff that you can put in place so that they're ready when development comes along. So just to get to this, so have I missed this? Nope. Move quickly to East Bathurst. Not a lot to say on this other than, there is less parkland. And obviously the Daly Point Nature Reserve is it's a particular type of use. I know it's very well used and used in the summer for camps. Just has to be maintained. And, the extent that you can innovate and consider an opportunity to do more with it, that should be done. Yeah, I wanted to get to undeveloped parkland to indicate that we're not just looking at the developed, but we recognize there is undeveloped parkland. We see it in a lot of places, and there has to be a question about, and we found it just by walking around to some degree. We went down to South Bathurst Park, and I was sort of looking on the map like, this is huge. There's an old playground, it looks like an old tennis court there. So what are we doing with this was the question. So we came up with our recommendations on here, but you can see from the map, dotted around, there's quite a lot. Now, the undeveloped is in the mustard color, if you can see that. I don't know if you see it on your screens up there. So they are dotted around, and they do have some potential, but they also, some of them are going to have no potential, and so they would be candidates for disposition if council had an interest in doing that. What has to happen, and we've said here, identify remnants of less than half a hectare, which is about, I should know this, about just over an acre, that are unusable. So the definition is it unusable? And there's a process you have to go through as to whether it's unusable, in our view. And that involves, firstly, what does a recreation master plan say that you need? So if you go through a process and you deem it essentially to be disposable because it's surplus to your requirements after looking at this and other things that you might wish to do, then I think that's healthy. So one of the things we identified, and I'm not sure what the status was, is we reviewed the disposition policy that the city had on file, which I think was from 1999. So we may be a little bit behind any changes to that, but that document is not good enough. You've got to be able to actually have a process to say this land is deemed to be surplus in an objective manner, and then you can run through a process of seeking to have alternative use, disposition, lease, whatever needs to be done. Two questions posed to us about the undeveloped parkland, and I'll just address both of them. South Bathurst Park, as you heard me mention, a very large holding. We're very cognizant that there's potential development opportunity, and there is quite a bit of parkland in and around this area. For us, it's the main spine coming through the trail, the New Brunswick Trail, go around the water. You can walk all the way around the downtown if you wish to. And that, again, is not too many places you can do that. You have about 80 kilometers of trails, which, again, that's quite a lot of trails. And so this is an opportunity. We said is if you wish to dispose of any of this, you could come up with a plan to do so. I think it has to be design driven. You have to make the whatever you put in the residential work. But from the parkland, that has to work as well, which means the parkland closer to the trail area. And I think you put in a range of things that could animate that space. You can imagine being on the trail, having the ability to stop. Could even be some sort of seating, some sort of gathering space along the trail. It becomes a point along it, pearls on a necklace. If you speak to landscape architects, they like to use that term, but it's that kind of thing where you have nodes along the trail. And then Vernon Park, when we looked at this, we saw it from the lens of Parkland, so we weren't aware of any opportunities for other. And you can see, if you look very closely, you can see where the outline of the old diamond used to be. I'm guessing at that, but it looks like there would have been a diamond patch in the corner there. But it's an interesting flat space, meadow-like. It's quite large. I think it's 3.3 acres, I think it is. So bigger than a neighborhood park. The question really becomes, what does this area need? It is north of Vanier, and there is Centennial Park to the south of that major intersection. You could certainly put some parkland on this. Could you do other things on this site as well? Yes. And so I think that's, our advice on that would be, if it's undevelopable and it can be disposed of, you're going to need to put parkland in anyway as it relates to that kind of use. Look at the area. We think that the area has a potential for having some level of parkland. So come up with a plan that's economically workable for the city to retain some of that. Lastly, on the trails, as I mentioned, there are significant trails, and for us, you can see the downtown trails, number 5 there, 18 kilometers worth. So I think it's a real investment potential. I think tourists do like those kinds of trails, and again, I think that should be a focus. Daily, and there are some others. The Micmac Trail there, New Brunswick Trail, obviously has significant places in role to play as well. So that's it, and thanks for your patience. I know it's a long slide presentation, but I'd be happy to pass it back to you and take any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. The question I would have is, should we be going ahead now with for the design part of the pool?
To you, Deputy Mayor, the approach, typically you would have a design, and then you would bid it, and then you'd have a consortium or a general contractor that would develop it for a given maximum price. And the longer you leave it, the more expensive it is going to get. My point about the event centers being a lot more expensive is because if you look historically, construction escalation is far more than the basket of goods escalation that we all experience, 2-3% a year. It's 5-6-7% sometimes. So you need to do it quicker, but the issue is that you do really need to get the funding and some of the partnerships are lined up, not necessarily completed, because that could mean you don't do it, but to move that file forward would get a commitment to cost share, or to get funding from government as well, to undertake some of the design work. The design work itself, it varies, but it might be, say, 4 to 5% of the total cost of the building. So it is not an insignificant exercise. But if you can, yes, you should move on that.
Okay, thank you. Got a few questions. Councillor Burnett.
Thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor. It's a long report. Very, very well done.
Thank you.
I took the time to read the whole thing. It's 90 pages long, and I had a lot of questions. Will you take questions in the future that we send to you to get some back? Because I could ask 2025 tonight, but I won't. But I do have a few that I'd like to talk to you about. Is the arena after hockey season? Have you seen them used for something else during the summer months, and like a soccer rink or some other activity that maybe with the weather bad, you go into the arena and use it for that? Have you seen that happen on other rinks?
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor. Firstly, on the first question you had, we'd be more than happy to field any questions that you have going forward. In fact, it's great if you can send us the questions, because it's an opportunity for us to have that conversation with you. On the arenas, I mean, it is the question, isn't it? Is, do you get good summer use? So the older, smaller arenas with bad air conditioning and bad HVAC. They don't become necessarily the best places in the summer to put kids and to put seniors for use of dry floor, but they do. It depends on how active the municipality is or the management of the building is to make those things happen. And then are there the organizations? We've seen some of these dry floor spaces, on the event center or community rinks get used for any number of things. Roller derby, I mean, you name it, it gets used. Some municipalities will purchase flooring, so you can host some tournaments. I'm not sure, maybe the city already does that, but putting a flooring down, a sort of interlock flooring on top of the dry pad, take the boards out, and then you can host a number of other things, including many different kinds of court sports. What we often see for something like a 4,000-seat venue, if it's privately managed, then meaning the municipality pays for a third-party management team that's really only concerned, blinkers on, just concerned with maximizing commercial use of the facility. So Avenir Centre is the obvious example of that. They're going to try and put as many events in there as possible. So the question is, as soon as the ice comes out, it's right, let's start putting in concerts and until it gets to the hot season, and then, work out a schedule for using it. But the bottom line is that a lot of buildings are somewhat dark in the summer months. So, as I said, it comes down to your desire to make best use of that asset.
I do quite a bit of reading, and what goes around comes around is the saying. And when I grew up on Miramichi, every Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday night during the summer, our rink was opened up for roller skating and dance after, and it was well attended. But that's 100 years ago. I don't know if kids do the same thing today. But anyway, it would be something to look at, because a lot of kids are getting back into the rollerblading, skating, I should say, not blading, but skating.
Yeah.
It's going back to that. And I'd like to see stuff like that looked at in the arena to give the kids something to do in the summertime inside.
Yeah.
The other thing is the downtown. Did you look at parking at all? That's a real problem we have. People, when we have our entertainment nights there, the parking issue drives the commissioners crazy. And yet, this council is sort of looking at shutting down a lane on the boulevard that we talked about it anyway. And that lane would be a very good parking lane all along the waterfront. You get out and you could picnic there. You could do all sorts of things on the waterfront and have a parking spot. Have you looked at that?
Well, through you, Deputy Mayor. Well, I live in Toronto, so you don't have a parking problem.
We don't.
But
well, you come with me one of these entertainment nights, and you'll hear about it.
Yeah, no, I understand. No, because that would be a transportation master plan piece, but you're absolutely right. Everything is connected to everything else. And our interest is activating spaces. So you mentioned that part of the highway that basically the boulevard area. Yeah, I think anything where you can get people out of their cars easily and effectively, where they don't have to walk across a busy road, all of that sort of stuff is interconnected. So if there is a recommendation in here to sort of look specifically at that, and to the extent that then morphs into considering how people get around once they get out of their car, and if they can get out of their car, within a reasonable walking distance, that's relevant. So no, we didn't, but I think it would make sense to look at that in the context of a waterfront sort of overview. Yeah.
My last question, I have more, but just the last one I'll throw at you. Burn-In Park, for example, leave it as a park, or maybe develop it as partly a park and then partly residential. There was turmoil over that last time we discussed it with the residents, but we didn't offer them an alternative.
Yeah.
In your role over the different communities you go into, when you say take a park and develop it, do you offer different scenarios? Like this could be parkland, this could be residential, this could be trails or whatever, and just give them something to look at rather than say, maybe we'll do this or maybe we'll do that. That's what really causes turmoil.
Yeah, we'll we do through Deputy Mayor, and just to back up. So when we looked at this in the summer, we're not privy to any considerations of whether there's developers who are interested or there's an opportunity to sell off real estate for a corporate strategy purposes. We looked at it as park planners. You know, we are land economists as well, so we kind of in our mind's eye think if it's undeveloped and it's a good subdivision type space, medium density, yeah, you know, that could provide much needed housing. And usually there's an opportunity to put parkland in there because it's required anyway. You know, 8% I think you have to provide under legislation. You're going to need to do it anyway. And then you look at what the broader area is. So any development has to throw up parkland, whether it's cash in lieu or it's dedication. So that's the first thing. But we do go into a number of communities, and we do have those charrette-type discussions where we'll go in and we'll say, what do you want? And usually there can be a little bit of animosity. I know I would feel the same way if someone wanted to develop housing. If I was on a single loaded street where I was looking at parkland, grass, and then somebody wanted to put housing in there, yeah, I'd be at that public meeting. So there is a real process to carefully kind of go through as to what the options are and get people's interests, and you hope at the end of the day, you hope that you can get a level of consensus. So what we're talking about here today is just very broad ideas that if you read the master plan, we say this is a definable square piece of parkland that people obviously have a benefit in the area because they're looking across at it. It's treed. It's obviously of value to people. If you were to develop lands, then you have to go through a process to see is it needed. So there is parkland needed in that area. But whether it's 3.3 acres, I think that's the discussion.
Thank you, and thanks for your patience, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
With Coronation Park Committee, Coronation Park, I should say, there's a committee in place. The committee was established about 20 years ago. Members, like, I think I'm the shortest standing member, and I've been there 11 or 12 years. Right. So, I mean, these folks have been around a long time. They meet monthly. We did commission a master plan for the park about 10 or 11 years ago. Ryan came and met with the park committee and went through your plan for the park. We've kind of exhausted, to a degree, most of the things that were on the initial plan that we received from Glen Group, I believe it was, out of Halifax. We looked at the soccer fields to do the artificial turf. I think we were around 3 or 4 million, Matt, something like that. To do grass turf, we were over $1 million to do that. This committee's gone out and gotten funding on their own. Like, a lot of the funding that's come for the park has come from outside sources that the committee has, where they've approached people. So right now we're at the point where we think we've kind of exhausted what we've done with the master plan that we have, and we had a discussion about it, looking to get a master plan specific to the park. Would you be able to do something like that for us? Give us a price on what it would cost to have that done?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, yeah, certainly we'd be more than happy to do that. And I think those kinds of plans benefit very much from having a real design look at it. So we're not designers, but what we often do is we work with designers, and we keep them honest, and we keep the whole thing focused on what we're trying to get out of. So yes, we can, and I just would sort of just state that when you look at Coronation Park, it is really, I mean, again, from the outside looking in, and from a professional lens, it really is a major asset.
It is. It's
it
the
really
major
is,
park of the
because
city.
You've got the church, and you've got the cenotaph, and you've got that sort of very urban condition at the top. You've got residential to the immediate west, I think, on one side of the street. You've got community gardens. There's a lot of busyness to bits of the park, which I think maybe there's some replanning that needs to happen to that. But it's, and I'm guessing you were talking about then putting in fields. You were talking about stabilizing then the soil to some degree.
Yeah, because we know that the soccer field that's there currently, I mean, it's very difficult for the kids to be running on that field. It's not very safe.
No.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And it's not positioned properly. It should be positioned running the opposite way than what it is. And we looked at it, and like I said, to put and the goal initially was to put an artificial turf there so that we would be able to host bigger tournaments, Atlantic tournaments that only want to play on artificial turfs.
So as soon as you do that, right, putting in the couple of $1 million, assuming the site conditions where it was solid, so you didn't have to deal with any of that, but you'd be looking at, sort of $2 million. You have to put a fence around it. You can't be kicking a ball off into, and you can't leave field turf.
I hate fences.
I know, but you can't easily leave field turf, which is the artificial turf,
True.
for guys like me that taught my kids to cycle on field turf because I knew when they fall off their bikes they weren't going to hurt themselves, right? But I shouldn't have had a bicycle on
No, you shouldn't have.
on the field turf. But you get into a slightly different kind of this asset, right? Becomes a major asset at that point. And so issues about lighting, you're going to light it because you want to use it into the end of October, and you want to use it if you can, May 1. So these are things to consider if you were doing, further planning for that field. But yeah.
But we would be interested in having another plan done because like ours is old now, and we discussed that maybe it'd be time to have it updated and worked around the current infrastructure that we've put in there over the last 10, 12 years.
Yeah. So the last thing I was going to say on that, depending on the designer who's sort of looking at this, a lot of people will look, there are things like ball diamonds built on waterfronts, right, and sports fields. There's a real debate in the community as to whether, the professional community, as to whether you should have sports fields in such prominent locations where it really should be given over to just unstructured use, right, general public as opposed to sports crews. But so that might mitigate against having things like field, artificial field turf, because it would give the impression of not being a public asset. So there's things to consider.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I'll get you, Ryan, you can work with John on that. Okay, great.
Thank you. Councillor Branch.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just kind of curious, like before we go too far down the road about the aquatic center, we would have to have discussions with our regional partners like about cost sharing and stuff like that. So from a previous meeting, you'd given us a good idea what the capital cost would be. I'm just curious, do you have an idea what a realistic annual operating deficiency would be? So
For the aquatic center?
yeah.
So I think, as you recall from the discussion that we had when we gave the main presentation, I think you've got to kind of put the existing facilities financials to one side.
Yeah.
And you've just got to ask, if you were to operate the facility as a municipal Class A pool, so operated by city staff and through the city administration, and if you were to get the scale that we suggested gets developed, which is a multi-tank pool, so it's not just one, and I forget, well, I think it was eight lanes that we had. 8 lanes. So fairly big, almost square tank. And just the other thing is the numbers we're getting in terms of usage from the existing pool were very, very high. So if you even peeled that back a little bit and said maybe that's a little bit too high, I think you're still looking in that sort of, you're going to get close to $750,000 in deficit for that kind of facility. That's just from what we see elsewhere, giving you those kinds of framing assumptions.
Yeah. No, so about 750 is what we could look at for budgeting purposes.
Well, I wouldn't do anything until you look at that again as part of the next step of this. So if the next step is to start to work with partners, I think then you need to have some really have us give you those numbers again. If you recall what we had prefaced a lot of this on the financials that were in place for the existing facility in terms of utilization. I think if we can get a bead on a range of utilization, sort of high and maybe a lower, then we can give a little bit more certainty to those numbers. So I'm hesitant to sort of say, yep, just take that number. It does depend on how you operate this facility.
No.
And remember, one thing, and remember, there was a daycare facility there is a daycare facility in the aquatic center, and that generates a fairly significant revenue, given the nature of what it is. There is a question about whether you would have a daycare facility at that location. Maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't, but that's going to affect things as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation, and I'm sure that our recreational department will be in touch with you through the course of this ongoing changes that we're.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, next we have municipal bylaws. Proposed zoning bylaw amendment for the revision of zoning provisions relating to residential development and the concept of gentle density.
That bylaw 2024-11Z entitled A Bylaw to Amend Bylaw 2008-01 entitled The City of Bathurst Zoning Bylaw be read for the third time by title.
We have a mover. Moved by Councillor Scarry, second by Councillor LeBlanc. Everybody in favor signify. Aye. Everybody opposed? Motion carried. 4.2.1. Is that?
4.2.1 for the proposed bylaw 2024-12 entitled A Bylaw to Approve the 2025 Budget of the Downtown Revitalization Corporation and to establish a special business improvement area in the city of Bathurst. That bylaw 2024-12 entitled A Bylaw to Approve the 2025 Budget of the Downtown Revitalization Corporation and to establish a special business improvement area levy in the city of Bathurst be read for the third time by title.
We have a mover. Moved by Councillor Legacy, second by Councillor Knowles. All those in favor signify. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. Draft resolutions. Infrastructure plan.
Whereas the infrastructure plan was presented to Council during the regular public meeting held on November 18, 2024, and whereas Council has reviewed the details of the infrastructure plan and recognizes its importance to the city's future planning and development, be it resolved that Council hereby accepts the infrastructure plan as presented during the regular public meeting on November 18, 2024.
Could I have a mover to that date? Councillor Hondas, second by Councillor Scarry. All those in favor, please signify. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. 2024 grants distribution.
That the grant distribution be approved as follows as discussed by the Grants Committee. $1,500 to EL2ES.
Could I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Burnett, second by Councillor LeBlanc. All those in favor, please signify. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. Items discussed in camera. Demolition of devalidated and dangerous buildings.
Item 5.3.1.1 for 550 St. Camille Street. Before we go to the motion, the information which has been provided in the report prepared by the Municipal Bylaw Enforcement Officer states that the building located at 550 St. Camille Street, having PID 2002-6688, is a hazard to the safety of the public by virtue of its being, amongst other things, dilapidated or structurally unsound. Is there present an owner, including anyone holding an encumbrance, on this property who wishes to present a counterclaim, i.e., the building is structurally sound and not dilapidated? Hearing from no one, we'll proceed. Whereas the property located at 550 St. Camille, PID 2002-6688, is a hazard to the safety of the public by reason of being vacant or unoccupied and dilapidated, and whereas the property contravenes the City of Bathurst Dangerous or Unsightly Bylaw 2019-05, and whereas the property owner has not appealed the notice to comply dated November 6, 2024, and whereas the property owner has not presented evidence that the building is structurally sound and not dilapidated, and whereas Council reviewed the Municipal Bylaw Enforcement Officer's report at the in-camera meeting on December 2, 2024, be it resolved that members of Council authorize the Municipal Bylaw Enforcement Officer to proceed with the enforcement of the City of Bathurst Dangerous or Unsightly Premises Bylaw 2019-05 to arrange for the demolition of the buildings and clean up the property at 550 St. Camille Street, PID 2002-6688, in accordance with the applicable city bylaws, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign all related documents on behalf of the city of Bathurst.
Could I have a mover to that effect? Moved by Councillor Branch, second by Councillor Knowles. All those in favor, please signify. Aye. All those opposed, motion carried. Next one.
Yep. Item 5.3.1.2, 234 Dumaresque Street. Again, before we go to the motion, the information which has been provided in the report prepared by the Municipal Bylaw Enforcement Officer states that the building located at 234 Dumaresque Street, having PID 2002-0871, is a hazard to the safety of the public by virtue of its being, amongst other things, dilapidated or structurally unsound. Is there an owner present, including anyone holding an encumbrance on this property, who wishes to present a counterclaim, i.e. that the building is structurally sound and not dilapidated? Hearing from no one, we will proceed. Whereas the property located at 234 Dumaresque Street, PID 2002-0871, is a hazard to the safety of the public by reason of being vacant or unoccupied and dilapidated, and whereas the property contravenes the City of Bathurst Dangerous or Unsightly Bylaw 2019-05, and whereas the property owner has not appealed the notice to comply dated November 6, 2024, and whereas the property owner has not presented evidence that the building is structurally sound and not dilapidated, and whereas Council reviewed the Municipal Bylaw Enforcement Officer's report at an in-camera meeting on December 2, 2024, be it resolved that members of Council authorize the Municipal Bylaw Enforcement Officer to proceed with the enforcement of the City of Bathurst Dangerous or Unsightly Premises Bylaw 2019-05 to arrange for the demolition of the building and cleanup of the property at 235 Dumaresque Street, PID 2002-0871, in accordance with the applicable city bylaws, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign all related documents on behalf of the City of Bathurst.
Could I have a mover to that motion? Moved by Councillor LeBlanc, second by Councillor Scarry. All those in favor, signify. Oh, sorry. Councillor Burnett.
When will they come down? And winter's here upon us now, and when I saw some of the pictures, it looked like there was people in some of these buildings, and it would be safer for everybody concerned if they were to come down as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'll go to Mr. McLaughlin.
We already went through the process for a tender, and the tender would be issued tomorrow, and we're very confident.
Your light's not, yeah, it's not on.
That's why he impressed these ones.
There we go.
Yeah. We already asked for quotation, and the tender will be issued tomorrow, and we're very confident that the building will be demolished by before December 25th.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll move to adjournment. Oh, do the vote. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Knowles.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Willett. I'd like to bring up the future of the Acadie Bathurst tight hockey. Oh, sorry, I'm jumping the gun here. My apologies.
Okay, so going back to the motion, all those in favor, please signify.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Now you can go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you very much, sir. I'd like to bring up the future of about the Acadie Bathurst Titan hockey team that has operated out of Bathurst since 1998. City of Bathurst has been a solid partner with the team for 27 years. And once again, it's the subject of media reports that we're about to be relocated. The team is going to be relocated to St. John's, Newfoundland. Is there any truth to this latest story? I don't know. Personally, I don't know. Has there been any communication from the team with the city, or is it just business as usual, which is little or no communication? I think the fans of the team deserve to know. The citizens deserve to know what's going on. Is there any credence to this latest report?
There is I'm the same way as you, Councillor Knowles. I see what I've read on, in the news media. There's been no communication from the team with the council, so I don't know if there's anything, no communication with the city neither, so it's just business as usual till we find out, I guess, through the news media of what's going on with the team, because they're not talking to us. So.
I think the people of Bathurst and surrounding areas deserve to know, to hear something. They should come up with something. Is it true? Is it not? Or is it just business as usual?
Definitely.
That's all I have to say about that.
Thank you, Councillor Knowles. Okay, so I'll move for an adjournment.
That the special public meeting be adjourned at 7:35 p.m.
Moved by Councillor LeBlanc, second by Councillor Hondas. All those in favor signify. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, everybody. Move to next meeting.